Welcome to Griffonomics.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so, when you're standing at a coffee shop counter and you just tap your phone against the terminal, there is this expectation of absolute frictionless simplicity.
Right. You just expect it to work.
Exactly. You hear that little electronic chime, a green check mark appears on the screen, and the transaction is just done. I mean, it takes maybe 2 seconds.
And those 2 seconds are, well, arguably the most fiercely contested, complex, and lucrative real estate in the entire global economy.
Oh, absolutely.
Because in the time it takes for that terminal to chime, you have this sprawling, completely invisible architecture of risk assessment, cryptography, and honestly, institutional trust that has to execute flawlessly.
Which is exactly why we are pulling out the magnifying glass today. So for you listening, whether you are an investor, a fintech enthusiast, or just insanely curious about how money actually moves around the world, you are in the right place.
We have a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We are going on a deep dive today into a massive stack of 2025 and 2026 financial filings. We've got earnings call transcripts, investigative reports from the absolute titans of the industry. It's a lot.
It's a mountain of paper.
Yeah, a mountain. And the mission for this deep dive is to tackle a theme we are calling the payments hegemony, a structural inflection analysis.
Catchy title.
Right. But the goal is to look straight past that piece of plastic in your wallet and decode the silent, multi-trillion-dollar battle that is currently raging between American Express, Visa, and MasterCard.
And honestly, it is such a critical time to be looking at this. The legacy payments industry is standing at a massive structural inflection point right now.
Yeah, the landscape is shifting under their feet.
Exactly. I mean, they are facing the rapid integration of artificial intelligence, looming regulatory threats, specifically regarding routing mandates, and the rise of entirely new digital rails.
You mean like stablecoins and instant account-to-account transfers, right?
Yeah, exactly. All of that. And the companies that survive this next decade, they won't be the ones that just, process payments. They will be the ones that own the underlying financial architecture.
So let's get right into that architecture. Because the way these companies defend against disruption is, well, it's entirely dictated by how their internal plumbing is designed.
That's the perfect way to phrase it. It's all about the plumbing.
Right. And reading through these filings, they draw a massive, just a stark distinction between the open-loop intermediaries, which would be Visa and MasterCard, and the closed-loop system of American Express.
Yeah, and the foundational difference here, the thing you have to grasp first, is balance sheet exposure.
Okay. Unpack that a bit.
Sure. So the filings refer to Visa and MasterCard's architecture as the four-party model. You have the consumer, the issuing bank, the merchant, and the acquiring bank.
That's four parties. Makes sense.
Right. But the key structural reality here is that Visa and MasterCard are strictly technology companies. I mean, they are pure data intermediaries.
They aren't banks.
Exactly. They do not issue the cards. They do not extend credit to the consumer. And they absolutely do not collect interest revenue.
I've always thought the best way to visualize their role is to look at them as like a global municipal toll road authority.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Yeah, because they don't own the cars driving on the asphalt, right? The cars are the consumers. And they certainly don't finance the auto loans for the drivers.
Right. They leave that to Chase or Citi or whoever.
Exactly. And they don't own the stores at the exit ramps either. They simply pave the most secure, high-speed, globally interoperable highway in the entire world.
And every time a data packet a car, in your analogy, drives over their concrete, they skim a fraction of a cent.
A tiny fraction, but at billions of transactions a day, it adds up.
It adds up fast. And that analogy holds up perfectly when you look at their margins. It is the ultimate asset-light model.
Because there's no heavy financial lifting.
Right. Because they don't finance the cars. If a driver crashes and defaults on their auto loan, Visa and MasterCard don't lose a single cent of capital.
Wow. Zero credit risk.
Zero. Their only operational mandate is to just maximize the sheer volume of traffic flowing over their rails and, maintain the structural integrity of the road.
Keep the road clear. Got it. But then you look at American Express and the architecture completely flips.
It's night and day.
Yeah, they operate a closed-loop model. They are the bank, the toll road, and the destination manager all integrated into a single entity.
They do everything. They extend the credit directly to you, the consumer, and they process the payment directly for the merchant.
Which collapses that whole four-party model into a direct two-sided relationship. Amex captures the data from the consumer side and the merchant side simultaneously.
Yeah, and that data visibility is a huge advantage.
But here is where the math gets a little complicated, at least for me. If American Express is doing all the heavy lifting, like if they're actually funding the loans, acquiring the customers, managing the merchant terminals, how on earth do they compete on scale?
That's the trillion-dollar question.
Right, because Visa and MasterCard just sit back and let thousands of partner banks flood their toll road with volume. Amex has to build every single car themselves.
Well, it comes down to a concept that the 2025 and 2026 strategy updates heavily emphasize, and that is pricing power.
Price and power. Okay.
Because American Express owns the entire loop, they dictate the merchant discount rate.
And that's the fee charged to the business for accepting the card, right?
Exactly. Historically, American Express charges a higher discount rate than the interchange fees associated with Visa and MasterCard.
Ah, right. The classic merchant complaint. You hear it all the time. Amex is too expensive to accept.
You hear it constantly.
So how are they justifying that premium to a retailer? I mean, retail margins are razor thin.
They justify it by weaponizing their demographics.
Oh, interesting.
American Express doesn't just sell a payment rail. They sell access to a highly curated, ultra-lucrative consumer base.
They are acting like a gatekeeper to the wealthy.
Pretty much. They are actively targeting affluent, high-spending cohorts. According to their internal metrics in the reports we reviewed, the spending velocity on their premium cards is just staggering.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure. A Platinum cardholder, for instance, spends roughly 10 times as much annually as a standard Blue Cash everyday cardholder.
10 times. That is insane.
It is. So to adapt your toll road analogy, Amex isn't just building a highway, they're building a private, luxury carpool lane.
Oh, I see.
And they guarantee the merchant that every single car getting off at their exit is a luxury vehicle driven by someone with immense purchasing power.
So the merchant isn't just paying for the concrete, they are paying for the customer acquisition.
Precisely. And that higher merchant discount rate funds the incredibly rich rewards programs. You know, the airport lounge access, the statement credits.
Right, the stuff that makes people want the card in the first place.
Exactly. Which in turn keeps those high-spending consumers fiercely loyal to the closed loop. It is a brilliant, self-sustaining flywheel.
Okay, but that flywheel carries a massive, unavoidable anchor. Because American Express acts as the actual issuer, they take on direct consumer and commercial credit risk.
They hold the bag.
Right. When you buy a laptop on an Amex card, it is Amex's actual balance sheet on the line until you pay your monthly statement. And as we said, Visa and MasterCard avoid this entirely.
Which brings us to the stark reality of the balance sheet battle.
Let's get into the numbers.
If you look at American Express's SEC 10K filing for the year ending December 31st, 2025, you see a $5.9 billion reserve specifically set aside for credit losses on card member lots.
Almost $6 billion.
Yeah. And just to maintain that massive vault of trapped capital, they had to provision over $4.6 billion out of their earnings in 2025 alone.
I mean, that is just incredible. That is nearly $6 billion sitting idle purely as a defensive shock absorber.
It's a huge drag on capital efficiency.
And that dynamic makes American Express incredibly sensitive to macroeconomic weather. In a high-for-longer interest rate environment, they feel the squeeze on both ends.
Yeah, they really do.
Because their cost to borrow funds and pay depositors goes up, which compresses their net interest yield. And simultaneously, the elevated rates put pressure on consumer wallets, which raises the statistical probability of a default.
It's a double whammy. But meanwhile, Visa and MasterCard's exposure to those exact same macroeconomic factors is completely different.
Because they don't lend the money.
Exactly. As the filings outline, their only real exposure on a transaction is what's called settlement risk.
Which operates on a completely different timeline, right?
Entirely different. Settlement risk is merely the danger that between the time a transaction is authorized and the time the funds actually move, which is usually just a 24 to 48-hour window, a participating bank completely collapses.
So a bank goes under mid-transaction?
Right, and fails to fund its daily settlement obligations. In that rare scenario, The network has to step in and guarantee the funds so the merchant is made whole.
But the historical data from the sources shows that because this exposure is measured in hours rather than months, and because, banks rarely implode overnight without warning, Visa and MasterCard experience minimal, often immaterial losses from these guarantees.
They are practically insulated from the credit cycle entirely.
Which makes that $5.9 billion Amex reserve look even more daunting.
It really does.
But here is the fascinating twist when you read through the Amex earnings call transcripts. Management does not sound panicked about this reserve at all.
No, they don't.
In fact, they sound remarkably comfortable. Holding $6 billion in reserves sounds terrifying, so why are they so relaxed about it?
To understand why, you really have to look at how that reserve is calculated versus how the portfolio is actually performing in the real world.
Okay, walk me through that.
American Express uses a specific accounting methodology called Current Expected Credit Loss, or CECL.
CECL.
Right. Under CECL, a financial institution cannot just wait for loans to go bad before setting aside money. They are legally required to project expected credit losses over a multi-year window using current macroeconomic forecasts.
So they have to look into a crystal ball.
Exactly. And if the Federal Reserve or consensus models project an uptick in unemployment or a slowdown in GDP, the CECL algorithms automatically force American Express to bloat that reserve.
So they are padding the bunker because the accounting rules demand they prepare for a macroeconomic storm.
That's right.
But what happens when you look outside the bunker?
Well, the storm isn't actually hitting their specific house.
What do you mean?
Despite the cautious macroeconomic outlook that drove all that provisioning, American Express's actual realized write-off rates are incredibly low.
Really?
For the last 2 years, their delinquency rate has hovered between 1.2% and 1.37%. It actually dipped even lower at the end of 2025.
Wow.
Yeah, management has repeatedly emphasized on these calls that these credit metrics are actually stronger than their pre-pandemic 2019 levels.
Wait, let's just process that for a second. The general economy has been tighter, inflation has pressured wallets, interest rates are higher, but people are defaulting less on their Amex cards now than they did 5 years ago.
That's what the data says.
How is that mathematically possible?
It is the direct result of their premiumization strategy.
Premiumization.
Yeah. For the past several years, Amex has aggressively focused their customer acquisition engine on younger, highly affluent demographics, specifically millennials and Gen Z.
Oh, targeting the youth.
Right. And the data they presented at the recent financial services conferences reveals a massive structural advantage. The credit quality of these younger premium cohorts is actually 40% better than the Gen X and baby boomer portfolios of their competitors.
Wait, so they are acquiring a generation that is fundamentally better at paying their bills?
Well, they're acquiring the specific subset of that generation that is better at paying their bills.
Oh, the high earners.
Exactly. The Amex CEO noted that their younger cohorts systematically outperform the competitors' older cohorts.
That is wild.
It is. So while the CECL accounting rules force them to reserve capital based on broad national macroeconomic averages, their actual portfolio is insulated because it is heavily skewed toward a premium, highly resilient demographic.
Okay, so Amex is defending its margins through premium demographics, even though they take on all that credit risk.
Right.
But if we swing back to the open loop side, Visa and MasterCard have a totally different problem.
Oh, completely.
They have zero credit risk, but their toll road is basically built. I mean, they have achieved near global saturation at this point.
Yeah, there aren't many places left to expand the physical network.
So if they aren't collecting interest and they can't realistically pave many more roads, how do they keep generating the massive margin growth that Wall Street demands every quarter?
By fundamentally changing what they sell.
Interesting.
This is arguably the most critical strategic evolution detailed in the 2025 and 2026 filings. They are pivoting from being just payment pipes to being digital security guards and data analysts.
Okay.
This entire suite of offerings is categorized under Value-Added Services, or VAS.
Right, VAS. And looking at the reports, VAS is no longer just a side project for them. The numbers are staggering.
They really are.
For MasterCard, value-added services now account for approximately 40% of their total revenue.
Which is huge.
And the detail that investors seem to absolutely love is that roughly 85% of those VAS revenues are highly recurring.
Yes. They are transitioning from transactional toll collectors to intelligence subscriptions.
Let's look at the mechanics of how they're actually doing this, because it requires massive capital deployment.
Billions of dollars.
Yeah. In December 2024, MasterCard acquired a company called Recorded Future for $2.65 billion in cash.
Nearly $3 billion.
Exactly. What exactly does Recorded Future do that makes it worth that kind of price tag to a payment network?
So Recorded Future operates as the world's largest threat intelligence company. They deployed these sophisticated AI and machine learning models to continuously scan the dark web. They are monitoring illicit forums, shady marketplaces, encrypted chat rooms, and they're looking for signals of compromised data.
Like stolen credit card numbers.
Exactly. Stolen card credentials, breached passwords, identity packages that hackers are actively trading or testing.
So they are basically running a massive radar system over the digital underworld.
That's a great way to put it.
But how does that integrate into a credit card swipe at a grocery store?
It happens in milliseconds.
Yeah.
Recorded Future possesses this constantly updating data set of what is happening on the dark web. MasterCard possesses the global real-time pipeline of payment authorizations.
Okay, I see where this is going.
By fusing these two assets together, MasterCard created a product called MasterCard Threat Intelligence. They basically overlay the dark web radar directly onto the transaction stream.
Let me guess, an API handshake.
Exactly, an API handshake. When a transaction request hits the MasterCard network, the system simultaneously queries the threat intelligence database. If Recorded Future has flagged that specific 16-digit card number as being actively traded by hackers, say, 20 minutes ago, MasterCard can instantly intercept the authorization.
Before it even goes through.
Right. They send a signal to the issuing bank with a high-confidence risk score, effectively saying, do not approve this transaction, and reissue this card immediately.
That is incredible. They stop the fraud before the hacker even attempts the purchase.
Yes. It shifts the entire paradigm from reacting to a chargeback to proactively predicting the crime.
And Visa is deploying an almost identical playbook, aren't they?
They are keeping pace, absolutely.
In 2025, Visa's value-added services hit $10.8 billion. That is nearly 30% of their total revenue, and in Q1 2026, they reported VAS growing at an astonishing 28% year over year.
It's their fastest growing segment.
And Visa's M&A activity reflects the exact same urgency as MasterCard. They acquired Featurespace for $946 million.
Yeah, nearly $1 billion.
Right, and that was to integrate real-time behavioral analytics that look beyond just the card number.
Exactly. Featurespace analyzes the context and the specific behavior of the transaction for anomalies. But where Visa is really flexing its technological muscle right now is in AI-driven bot defense.
Oh, you're referring to the enumeration attacks.
Yes.
This was the specific data point in the Q1 2026 earnings transcript that really grounded the scale of the problem for me. Visa developed a tool called Visa Account Attack Intelligence.
Right. Let me explain what an enumeration attack is, because it's wild. It is essentially a brute force siege.
A siege?
Yeah. Fraudsters write these automated bot scripts that rapidly and systematically guess card numbers, expiration dates, and CVV codes across thousands of e-commerce checkout pages simultaneously.
Who's guessing numbers?
Just guessing. They do it until they find a mathematical combination that successfully processes a tiny test transaction.
It's like a burglar running down a hotel hallway, jiggling every single doorknob at lightning speed until one just clicks open.
That is exactly what it is. But Visa deployed an AI model that scored 60 billion transactions over a 12-month period.
60 billion?
Yes. And out of that massive data set, it successfully identified and blocked 600 million enumeration attempts in the U.S. alone.
600 million. That math is just terrifying if you are an issuing bank.
Oh, for a bank, it's a nightmare. It implies a massive volume of the traffic hitting your servers is entirely hostile.
Exactly. And this is why the VAS pivot is an absolute masterstroke for Visa and MasterCard.
They've made themselves essential.
Right. They have positioned themselves so that they are no longer just an optional payment rail. They are the active defense mechanism for the entire banking sector.
And they sell these AI security layers back to the issuing banks, the acquiring banks, and even the merchants. They are monetizing the trust gap inherent in digital commerce.
Monetizing the trust gap. That is brilliant.
And then, this highlights another structural divergence with American Express.
Oh, so?
Well, Visa and MasterCard sell B2B cybersecurity and data analytics to thousands of client banks. Amex doesn't have thousands of client banks.
Because they are the bank.
Right, they have consumers. So their version of VAS is entirely different.
Right. Looking at the filings, Amex's non-transaction revenue engine is called net card fees.
Yes.
Instead of selling threat intelligence to a bank, they sell premium lifestyle subscriptions directly to you, the consumer.
The perks.
Exactly. By constantly refreshing the perks on their gold and platinum cards, adding digital entertainment credits, global dining access, specialized Uber Cash, they convince their cardholders to pay hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars a year.
Just for the privilege of holding the metal in their wallet.
Exactly. And the retention on those fees is phenomenal. In 2025, American Express pulled in a record $10 billion in net card fees alone.
Which is an 18% increase over the previous year.
It's just wild.
Hmm.
So all three players have built these massive multi-billion-dollar secondary engines. But when you read the risk factors section in the 10K filings, a very clear narrative emerges.
The regulatory storm.
Yes, these massive investments in AI security and premium perks aren't just offensive growth strategies. They are highly defensive moats being constructed to survive a looming regulatory siege.
And the most immediate and explicitly named threat in the Visa and MasterCard filings is the proposed Credit Card Competition Act, or the CCCA.
The CCCA.
Right. The industry broadly refers to this as Durbin 2.0. It's a spiritual successor to the original Durbin Amendment that capped debit card interchange fees following the 2008 financial crisis.
And the mechanics of Durbin 2.0 are really fascinating because they attack the open-loop model at the physical chip level.
They really do. The CCCA pushes for what are known as routing mandates.
Walk us through how a routing mandate works.
Currently, if an issuing bank, say a bank with over $100 billion in assets, issues a Visa credit card, that physical EMV chip on the card is cryptographically hard-coded to route the transaction exclusively over the Visa network.
Okay.
The CCCA would legally mandate that these large banks must enable a choice of at least 2 unaffiliated networks on every single credit card issued.
Wow. It essentially forces the bank to load a second application onto the EMV chip.
Exactly.
It would be like the federal government telling Apple, you can no longer force developers to exclusively use the iOS App Store. You must natively embed the Android Google Play Store onto every single iPhone and let the developers choose which one is cheaper to process their payments.
That is a perfect analogy. That is the exact intent of the legislation. By forcing 2 unaffiliated networks onto the card, the legislation aims to allow the merchant, not the consumer, and not the issuing bank, to choose which network routes the transaction.
And naturally, the merchant is going to optimize their terminal software to automatically route the transaction over whichever network charges the lowest interchange fee.
Of course they will. It's a race to the bottom.
Which destroys Visa and MasterCard's pricing power. And they argue vehemently against this in their lobbying efforts, right?
They're fighting it tooth and nail. Their argument is that if merchants route based solely on cost, they will bypass the advanced AI security layers we just talked about.
The threat intelligence and bot defense.
Right. Visa and MasterCard's argument is that removing the premium interchange revenue will just hollow out the funding that pays for fraud protection, zero liability guarantees, and consumer rewards programs.
It's a huge standoff. But then consider how American Express navigates this political landmine.
This is where their model shines.
Because they operate a closed-loop system, meaning they are the issuer, the network, and the acquirer, they do not sit between 2 unaffiliated banks.
Right.
Therefore, their proprietary network architecture is largely exempt from the direct routing mandates proposed in the CCCA.
They found a structural loophole in the legislation.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Amex CFO explicitly stated at a recent conference that they are, quote, not party to this. In their strategic filings, they officially consider themselves net neutral on the CCCA.
Net neutral, meaning they aren't worried.
Exactly. Their only genuine risk is indirect pricing pressure. If Visa and MasterCard are forced to slash interchange fees, merchants might eventually demand that Amex lower its discount rate to remain competitive.
Sure, market pressure.
But structurally, Amex avoids the blunt force trauma of the actual mandate.
So, facing this intense regulatory pressure and the constant existential threat of an issuing bank deciding to just migrate its portfolio to a competing network, Visa and MasterCard have to fight a daily war of attrition to keep their clients loyal.
And the ammunition in that war is pure cash.
Pure cash.
The filings categorize this under client incentives or rebates, and the numbers here are just staggering.
Let's hear them.
In order to secure long-term routing preference and exclusivity agreements, Visa and MasterCard pay massive sums back to the financial institutions, the merchants, and the co-brand partners.
Just to keep them on the network.
Yeah. This is treated as contra revenue. It is subtracted directly from their gross revenues before they even report their net figures.
In 2025, according to the docs, MasterCard paid $20.5 billion in rebates and incentives.
Over $20 billion.
And Visa paid $15.8 billion. That is over $36 billion collectively spent in a single year just to bribe the banks to keep printing their logos on the plastic.
Bribe is a strong word, but yeah, it perfectly illustrates the vulnerability of the open-loop system. When you don't own the end consumer, you have to constantly pay the entity that does.
But Amex doesn't have partner banks to incentivize. They issue the cards themselves. So where does their massive capital go?
It goes directly to the consumer. American Express categorizes this as variable customer engagement.
Which includes what?
It includes the cost of card member rewards, the massive global lounge network they run, and targeted marketing.
Okay.
In 2025, Amex spent an astonishing $30.9 billion on direct-to-consumer engagement.
$30.9 billion. That comparison is honestly the most illuminating metric in this entire deep dive for me.
It tells the whole story.
It really does. Visa and MasterCard spend $36 billion bribing the banks to stay. American Express spends roughly $31 billion bribing you, the consumer, to stay.
It is the exact same defensive mechanism, just deployed at opposite ends of the transaction lifecycle.
And as those defensive costs continue to rise, and as the consumer credit card space becomes increasingly saturated and heavily regulated, all three networks are being forced to look beyond the consumer wallet for their next wave of growth.
They have to. The consumer market is too tight.
Which brings us to the B2B space, business-to-business payments. I was looking through the market sizing data in the research, and there is a $77 trillion with a T uncarded B2B market out there.
$77 trillion. It's hard to even conceptualize.
It's a mind-numbing ocean of capital that these networks have barely tapped.
It is the ultimate frontier for them. Because despite all the frictionless, biometric, instantaneous payment tech we enjoy as consumers every day, the reality of corporate treasury is shockingly archaic.
It's like going back in time.
It is. A massive percentage of that $77 trillion is still reliant on manual invoicing, clunky ACH batch files, and physical paper checks sent through the Postal Service.
That always confuses people. I mean, if I can instantly beam $20 to a friend from my smartwatch, why is a Fortune 500 company mailing a physical piece of paper to pay a multi-million-dollar supplier invoice?
Right, it sounds ridiculous. But the complexity isn't in moving the money. The complexity is in reconciling the data.
Ah, the data.
When you buy a coffee, it's a simple one-to-one transaction. But a corporate payment is an absolute nightmare of data management.
Give me an example of how bad it gets.
Imagine a $5 million treasury transfer. That single payment might cover 400 separate line item invoices.
Okay, 400 invoices.
And it might include a 2% deduction because they were paying 15 days early, minus a disputed charge for damaged freight, plus a localized tax adjustment for 3 different jurisdictions.
Good grief. And all of that mathematical context has to be perfectly recorded in both the buyer's and the supplier's enterprise resource planning software, their ERPs like SAP or Oracle.
Exactly. If a supplier just receives a raw $5 million wire transfer with no data attached, their accounting department will spend weeks trying to figure out which invoices are actually settled. It breaks the ledger.
So a paper check, ironically, is often preferred because it comes in an envelope with a printed 10-page remittance manifest.
Yes. The data and the money travel together in the same envelope.
So how do the card networks solve this and digitize that $77 trillion? They can't just hand a corporate treasurer a plastic Visa card and say, swipe this.
No, they do it through deep software integration. The filings heavily feature platforms like Visa B2B Connect and MasterCard Move.
What's the strategy there?
The strategy is to embed their payment rails directly into the procurement software through API partnerships with companies like SAP, Coupa, and GEP.
So the network literally lives inside the accounting software.
Exactly. When a corporate buyer approves an invoice in their SAP dashboard, the system doesn't print a paper check. Instead, it instantly calls the MasterCard or Visa API.
And what does the API do?
It generates a highly restricted, single-use virtual card credential, specifically authorized for the exact penny amount of that invoice.
And that virtual card credential carries the data payload with it.
Yes. The virtual card is processed, the supplier gets funded instantly without taking on credit risk, and the underlying data payload automatically performs a three-way match and reconciles the ledger in the supplier's ERP system.
It solves the whole puzzle.
Right. The network eliminates the paper check, solves the data reconciliation nightmare, and takes a microscopic slice of a massive corporate transaction.
And alongside B2B, the other major growth vector highlighted in the 2026 earnings transcripts is cross-border volume.
Cross-border transactions are the holy grail of margin for these networks.
Why is that?
When a transaction crosses a jurisdictional border and requires currency conversion, say a U.S. tourist buying dinner in Tokyo, the network captures multiple layers of fees.
Ah, they double dip.
They capture the cross-border processing fee, the currency conversion spread, and the standard data processing fee.
And the networks are fighting fiercely for this travel rebound volume. In early 2026, MasterCard reported an 11% growth in ex-Europe cross-border volume.
Which is very strong.
Yeah, holding a very slight edge over Visa, which reported 10% growth in travel-related cross-border volume.
Capturing that international flow is just critical, especially as domestic consumer spending faces those macroeconomic headwinds we discussed.
But wait, all of these B2B and cross-border solutions, even the fancy virtual cards embedded in SAP, they still fundamentally rely on the legacy card rails.
They do.
What happens if those rails are bypassed entirely? Not regulated by Durbin 2.0, but technologically obsoleted.
You were talking about the existential threat of alternative payment rails, specifically the rise of account-to-account, or A2A payments.
A2A, right.
This technology allows funds to move directly from the consumer's bank account to the merchant's bank account in real time. It completely sidesteps the Visa, MasterCard, or Amex routing infrastructure.
In the U.S., the Federal Reserve launched the FedNow service to facilitate this exact type of instant settlement between banks, right? 247, 365 days a year.
Yes, FedNow is a prime example.
And globally, you see systems like Pix in Brazil or UPI in India that have already massively disrupted traditional credit card volume.
Massively.
If I am a merchant and a government-backed rail allows me to accept an instant real-time payment directly from my customer with zero interchange fees, why would I ever accept a credit card again? Doesn't this render the legacy networks completely obsolete?
It absolutely threatens their core volume. But the networks have identified a massive vulnerability in these new systems. They call it the trust gap.
The trust gap. Explain that.
The defining feature of an instant account-to-account payment is that it is irrevocable. Once the money leaves the account, the cryptographic settlement is final. It is the digital equivalent of handing someone physical cash.
Which the merchant loves because it totally eliminates chargeback.
Yes, merchants love it.
Yeah.
But it is a systemic nightmare for the consumer and the banking system. Because instant, irrevocable payments mean instant, irrevocable fraud.
Oh.
If a bad actor uses a phishing scam to trick a consumer into authorizing an A2A transfer, there is no built-in dispute resolution mechanism on those rails.
The money is just gone.
Gone. There is no zero liability protection like you have on a legacy credit card. The money vanishes in milliseconds, and the banks are left dealing with a furious customer and a total loss of trust in the digital system.
And as these alternative rails scale globally, the fraud vectors must be scaling exponentially alongside them.
Exactly.
So how do the legacy networks respond to this? Do they just try to lobby against FedNow in Congress?
No, they are much smarter than that. They pivot to become its security apparatus.
Wow.
Visa and MasterCard recognize that while a central bank can build a highly efficient pipe to move money, the central bank does not possess decades of proprietary fraud modeling, behavioral analytics, or global threat intelligence.
Well, they don't have recorded future.
Exactly. So Visa and MasterCard are taking their value-added services, the tools built by Recorded Future and FeatureSpace, and selling them directly to the alternative networks.
They are saying, go ahead and use the open banking rail, but when you start drowning in fraud, you are going to need to buy Visa Protect or MasterCard Account-to-Account Protect to scan the traffic.
That is exactly what they are doing. They are framing themselves as complementary to the disruption. By selling AI security overlays to real-time rails, they are monetizing the very trust gap that the new technology created.
That is some 3D chess right there.
It really is.
And they are applying this exact same logic to blockchain and digital currencies. Looking at the reports, we have to talk about MasterCard's $1.8 billion acquisition of BVNK in early 2026.
BVNK, yes.
BVNK is a stablecoin and digital currency orchestrator. Why is the legacy king of fiat currency spending nearly $2 billion on a crypto company?
Because MasterCard anticipates a highly fragmented, multi-chain future. In the acquisition call transcript, MasterCard's chief product officer detailed how regulatory clarity is finally shifting the digital asset space away from speculative trading and toward actual utility.
Utility, like what?
The industry is moving towards stablecoins and tokenized deposits as highly efficient mechanisms for moving value, particularly in that cross-border B2B space we discussed earlier.
There was a great example used in that transcript about a flour exporter in Ecuador.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Right now, if that exporter needs to collect receivables from buyers across Europe, Asia, and North America, moving that money via traditional correspondent banking is a nightmare.
It takes forever.
Jumping through multiple intermediary banks, waiting days for settlement, paying heavy FX fees, it is incredibly inefficient.
But using a US dollar-pegged stablecoin solves that entirely. It offers 247 availability, instant settlement, and total transparency on a public ledger.
But the new problem is fragmentation, right?
Yes. The exporter in Ecuador might want to receive funds in USDC on the Solana blockchain. But the buyer in Europe might be holding a tokenized euro deposit on a private bank consortium ledger.
It's an interoperability nightmare. They aren't speaking the same language.
Exactly. And that is what BVNK solves. It acts as a universal translation layer, a payments orchestrator. It abstracts all the back-end complexity of navigating multiple blockchains, sourcing liquidity providers, and managing regulatory compliance into a single, clean API.
So by acquiring BVNK, MasterCard is positioning itself to be the ultimate interoperability toll booth.
Precisely. They don't care if a transaction originates in fiat US dollars, moves across a blockchain as a stablecoin, and settles in a supplier's account as a tokenized euro.
They just want to be in the middle of it.
MasterCard just wants to be the intelligence layer that securely routes, converts, and authenticates that value. They are future-proofing their relevance.
Whether the underlying technology is a magnetic stripe, an EMV chip, or a smart contract on a blockchain, the requirement for trust and interoperability remains constant.
That's the core thesis.
Okay, we have covered an immense amount of ground today.
We really have.
We've mapped the structural architectures, the billions in credit reserves, the high-margin pivot into AI security, the regulatory battles, and the frontier of digital disruption. Let's pull all of this together.
Let's do it.
If we synthesize these sources to evaluate the ultimate strategic outlook, who is best positioned for the next decade, it really seems to come down to a battle of philosophies. Safety versus premiumization.
From a purely structural and risk-adjusted perspective, Visa and MasterCard are historically viewed as the safer long-term bets.
Because of the asset-light model.
Right. It all circles back to the asset-light architecture we started with. They carry absolutely zero direct consumer credit risk. If the macroeconomy enters a severe, prolonged recession and consumer defaults skyrocket, Visa and MasterCard's balance sheets remain pristine.
While Amex takes the hit.
Exactly. Furthermore, their pivot into value-added services has deeply entrenched them into the global cybersecurity infrastructure.
The digital security guards.
Yes. They have ensured that even if a transaction bypasses their payment rail, the bank still has to pay them for the threat intelligence to secure the transaction. They are structurally indispensable.
But you cannot ignore the generational moat that American Express is building. Yes, they carry the heavy burden of direct credit risk, and yes, their model is capital intensive, but their execution on customer acquisition is a masterstroke.
The demographics are undeniable.
The fact that millennials and Gen Z made up 65% of all new global consumer accounts acquired in Q4 2025 is a staggering statistic.
And it fundamentally alters their risk profile over time. By acquiring a demographic whose credit quality is 40% stronger than older cohorts, they are actively de-risking their own balance sheet through superior data-driven underwriting.
And the unit economics of that demographic are highly favorable too. These younger generations are digitally native.
They don't call customer service.
Exactly. They don't tie up expensive call centers. They self-service through the mobile app. The filings note that these digital-first consumers cost roughly 40% less to service.
That is a massive margin boost.
Right. So Amex is capturing the best credit risks, who spend the highest volume and cost the least to maintain. By locking in these affluent consumers in their late 20s and early 30s, Amex is securing a highly loyal base that will drive compounding growth for decades as those individuals enter their peak earning years.
It is the ultimate closed-loop advantage, owning the relationship so deeply that the consumer never even considers an alternative.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought that builds on everything we've unpacked today.
What's that?
Well, we talked extensively about how the networks use AI to block bot attacks and secure transactions. But the 2026 strategy updates hint at a rapidly approaching era of agentic commerce.
Agentic commerce. This is where artificial intelligence isn't just securing the transaction, it is executing the transaction.
Exactly. Imagine a near future where highly autonomous AI agents run in the background of your life.
Like a digital assistant on steroids.
Right. Your AI assistant has authorization to negotiate your utility bill, dynamically reorder groceries when sensors detect the fridge is empty, or instantly pay a microsubscription to bypass a paywall on a news article.
It all happens invisibly, machine to machine, without you ever touching a card or looking at a screen.
It removes the human friction from the economy entirely. But here is the critical question for you to mull over. As transactions become entirely invisible and driven by code, will the traditional concept of a credit card disappear into the background?
Or will we hold on to it even tighter?
Right. Paradoxically, will we desperately cling to the closed-loop safety, the zero liability guarantees, and the deep institutional trust of legacy networks like American Express, Visa, and MasterCard?
Just to feel safe.
Specifically to protect us from the sheer anxiety of rogue AI spending our money without our conscious consent. In a world where machines execute the spend, the entity that guarantees the refund might just be the most valuable company on Earth.
The architecture of trust will always be the ultimate moat.
Risk defined, portfolio protected.